Hey guys, welcome back to another IT job coach video. It's been a while. I hope you guys have been well. I've been really busy. I've wrote a bunch of certifications. I've done a lot of mentoring and all kinds of stuff. So I hope you guys have been keeping busy and staying healthy. One of the guys I was coaching, let's call him Peter, asked me a very common question that I want to cover with you guys. And I basically summarized everything that I taught him in that mentoring session into something I call 4 things you need to know before applying for an IT job. So let's get started. So my friend, let's call him Peter. So during the coaching session, Peter had a question. He wanted to change his job. He's been working in the PC industry for a while. He's been working in IT for a while. And he wanted to really transition from his job into something more palatable, something that could pay more, something that has more futures. So he's currently a PC technician. He's been doing it for a while. What he does is he goes in every day and he troubleshoots issues with IT around the office. So with that being said, what kind of skills does Peter need to actually do his future job? What could he put on his resume? So all these questions we covered during his coaching session. Some of the problems he had was he listed a lot of his skills on his resume that really didn't help him. So what he really needed to do is look at his current job and write down all the things that are beneficial for future careers. And I gave him a bunch of them to put in. Some of the highlighted skills that he did during his career was problem solving. He was able to go and fix a lot of issues around the office, put his problem solving hat on and try to figure out any issues, why normal steps didn't work and what would he have to do on top and above his current day-to-day. Talk about how he troubleshooted tickets, he pushed them to resolution, he was responsible, how he had customer support skills by going and talking to customers and making sure they're happy when he walks away. He also showed that he had basic networking skills. He was able to go and troubleshoot connectivity issues, whether it's IP, he knew how to do pings and trace routes and gateways and all that stuff, set up DNS server connectivity, and also how he worked on software installations, upgrading, patching, and making sure that any viruses didn't come in. So those were lots of great skills he could highlight on his current resume. But the question he had was what kind of jobs can he actually go to? What kind of skills does he need? And we're going to cover some of this today. So what Peter did was called a front-end job. He was directly involved with customers. He was more into the first layer, the actual clients that touched the back-end data centers. Now he wanted to transition into an infrastructure job, which means he could actually double his salary or get more money from moving into this transition and have a better future, because there's a lot more opportunities and different types of jobs you could get into when you go from front end all the way to infrastructure. Now, there are several categories that we need to look at when you go into this transition. You need to understand the cloud, the data center, which includes the applications like database, Sybase, SAP, any kind of custom built applications like web apps, mail services, Active Directory or other LDAP directory services, and DNS. Then you have to have a good foundation of networking skills, and security skills. So all of these are common fields you could get into when you go into your first job into IT. So the first thing we want to talk about are the skills required. So what kind of skills do you really need when you go into this type of job? So when we look back into these pillars, one thing we want to ask ourselves is networking. We start with networking, and a very common skill set you want to do is get a CCNA certification. Well, if you can't get the certification, at least go through the content. CCNA covers the whole OSI model from layer 1 all the way to layer 7, and it gives you a very good foundation to know how IP addresses work. how routing works, how basic ARP protocols and layer 2 protocols, how switching, all that stuff integrates with each other. So it's a very good foundation to start off your career while you move into the back-end infrastructure pieces. The other thing is Linux. You should know your basic scripting, your ability to go in and configure some of the scripts. The next thing you want to know is Linux skills, which is basic scripting. Knowing how to add packages, how to install Linux and connect it into the network, how to do basic troubleshooting on Linux, how to start up processes, because a lot of applications that you install on Linux, you want to make sure it restarts, it boots properly, how to collect logs, how to zip them, how to actually unzip stuff and send it off using wget or FTP or SCP or whatever kind of secure protocols your company allows. So you want to get used to those types of tools and be able to play around with stuff in that manner and be very comfortable. How to actually use host files, host names to connect in case you don't have routing. That's a very common IT environment where you don't have a gateway and you have to create your own static routes from one server to another, and you have to add these custom host names to allow it to map. Next, we want to talk about cloud skills. And cloud, we also mean virtualization. So cloud, if you guys are on Neil Davis's courses, that's a very excellent start. You could get your practitioner and associate certification right from his content alone. And then with that, you might want to try thinking about multi-cloud, because clouds are actually exploding. A lot of companies are using more than one cloud. So being familiar with one might not suffice anymore. You might also need an extra course like the Azure Fundamentals. Just as an FYI, I was able to write the Azure Fundamentals within 2 days of studying and writing the exam. It took me about 15 minutes to write that exam. So once you pass Neil's course, you could actually go and study for the Azure Fundamentals and pass that pretty easily. A lot of the commonalities are there. And then in the data center space, you do have VMware virtualization. There's also Red Hat, Ansible, and all that stuff, and also Microsoft's Hyper-V. I would focus more on VMware, primarily because in North America, from where I stand, it is in the majority of the data centers. So most of them are deploying VMware, or they have some form of virtualization that you should be familiar with. And just by having that, you've bridged the data center and the cloud, which is going to give you a big jump ahead, a leap forward compared to a lot of other people going into IT. Finally, there is the security. And with security, what we talk about is being able to harden and go in secure environments, knowing how to patch things, just having a very secure mindset, knowing how to set up firewalls and ACLs, knowing how to troubleshoot ports. You know, if I can't connect to a certain application, you know how to troubleshoot around the ports. So those are some of the basic skills required. So number 2, what job title should you apply for? So what job title should you apply for? So we see multiple data center jobs and then cloud jobs. So when I talked to Peter, he was kind of confused with all these different terminologies that he was looking at. There was junior specialist, senior specialist, junior cloud specialist, junior AI specialist. Then he saw all kinds of analyst jobs, and it looked like those were IT related too. And then he saw engineers, so cloud engineer, application engineer, and then he saw stuff like support engineer. Obviously, there's going to be developers and DevOps and all those other fields as well. So he got a bit confused on that, and let me just explain the background on a lot of these. First, we'll start bottom up. Customer support engineer, cloud support engineer. A lot of these are usually hired by vendors, so AWS, Microsoft, and they would be the people that pick up the phone, and they have scripts that they read through. It's basically like a help desk, and they would be level 1, level 2, etc. So from there, they troubleshoot based on logs. It requires a lot of problem solving. It requires a lot of good knowledge on the products for you to be able to do these roles, and also very good experience into how to troubleshoot and knowing technology in general. So when someone says, oh, I have an SAP connectivity issue, you sort of know what it is. You're not guessing, you're not Googling it on the fly. You actually have a good foundation of maybe not super deep, you maybe never logged in before, but you know what it is. So that's really what support engineers are. I'd say you do need a familiarity with some skills. A lot of them are junior people now because clouds are exploding. They can't hire really knowledgeable people fast enough. So what they do is they do give you a very good knowledge base that you can search through, almost like a Google search. Every time someone calls you, you troubleshoot for keywords. Sorry, you search for keywords, and you're able to help the customer resolve those issues. The engineers are more focused into sometimes development or really working through deep technical issues with support. And then we have our specialist and analyst jobs, which is really a specialist is a very good deep knowledge, and an analyst is a generalist. So they know more wide, whereas a specialist is very, very detailed. I'll go into more details with that. So what seniority should you apply to? It really depends, and I'm going to focus a bit more on the specialist and analyst role that we talked about. And the specialist is really going into deeper and more focused. So think about an Exchange or an Office 365 specialist. It means he knows a lot about it, how to recover mailboxes, how to go in and migrate from one domain to another one, how to actually, if there's a very unique bug, he's very into that technology. He knows exactly which special advanced features or which logs or what files to manipulate to actually get the service running. Whereas an analyst is more a general person, so he knows exactly how to deploy Exchange, but he doesn't really know inside the details of how it works. He knows in general form how everything is, and he gets a lot of the basic functions like going in and deploying 10 or 20 mailboxes, and then going in to make sure the ports are open and doing random stuff like that. Now, if you look at these titles, there's also broken down into senior and junior and advisory and principal. So if you're new to IT, you would want to apply to jobs that say analyst or junior analyst. Those are entry level. It requires about 1 or 2 years of experience at most, and then you could actually move into something more senior. So if you have 3 to 4 years of experience, you could go for the senior and advisory roles. And then obviously the principal roles are very advanced. It means you're super expert, you know a lot of people in the industry, you're part of a lot of forums and communities, and you're very outspoken. So those are very elite level persons. It's not something that someone coming into IT would be able to apply to within the first year or two. Now, also, if you wanted to apply for a specialist, you should have very deep knowledge or experience into those technologies. So at most, if you're going for, I'll stick with SQL, for example, if you're going to be a database specialist, you better have gone through a lot of admin courses or have some kind of certification or years of experience to back up a specialist role. That would definitely help you if you're competing with other people in that market. So we talked about all this stuff before, and you see a lot of the exams are architects. So what about the architect role, Rick? So when I was talking to Peter, he was thinking about applying for an architect role, and is that something he could do, because he did pass some of the admin courses, and he does have a certification that says architect on it. So there's a big failing with AWS and Azure and all these folks that write that have the word architect on their title. It doesn't mean that you have the skills to be an architect. It just means that you have the knowledge and I guess all the configurations to be an architect for that one category. Usually when we look at architecture, we're talking about being able to put everything in a very, very good context, meaning if the company decides to grow 3 years from now and expands 40 times into scale, how can you pre-design all this stuff so that everything you're going to day in, day out works for that? How is all the backup and recovery working? How do you recover in case you get cyber attacked? Where do you collect all the logs to make sure you're compliant, and who's tracking it? So you do need some skills in business, compliance, you have to interface with different parties, and it's more like you're a manager, project manager, and forecaster, all with the IT skills to be able to do it all. So you're planning against your organization. If it merges, how would all that apply? That's more of an architect role. Now there's specific architect roles for cloud, specific architect roles for security, for mail, for all kinds of different things. And then there's also architects for infrastructure, which means how does all these pieces stick together. And usually that's where a lot of my mentorees work. They're in the architect field and they're looking onto the next level. So while I do a lot of the YouTube videos for you guys and the Facebook groups and my blog and all this stuff is really for you guys to help you get into IT. A lot of the personal one-on-one mentorings I do on the side is to help the architects and senior levels move on to the next part of their lives or careers. Finally, number 4 is Sharpen the Saw. If you guys read some great books out there, Stephen Covey is a very good author. He changes a lot of mindsets about how you go and do things. So Stephen's number 7 habit of very effective people is sharpen the saw. What that really means is you invest in yourself. So while you get into IT and you're starting into this career, you have to start immersing yourself into the technology. It has to be something that's part of you. It makes you better, because if you don't like reading and you have to force yourself to read, this might not be the career for you. So make sure you are interested in this stuff, that when we say immerse yourself, you really go and learn the technologies, you read up on it. It is part of an interest for you and you do like this stuff, because if you don't like it, if the passion isn't there, I'm not saying you can't get a job, but it definitely helps you move ahead later on in life. The other thing is make sure you have a very good network, and a network allows you to have contacts. A lot of jobs that people get into is via contacts. So if you don't have a very good network, you're not going to be able to succeed. So make sure you build relationships and you foster that relationship. It's not just connecting on LinkedIn. That does nothing for you. You really have to grow your network, participate, help each other, and there's a lot of ways you could do to build your network to have really good trusted people that you can rely on and they can rely on you. And then the next thing is you do have to put in effort. I know a lot of you guys like to subscribe, ask questions. However, when it comes down to it, there's always reasons why we can't do things. So you really have to push yourself above and beyond all the stuff that's holding you back and really take charge of everything. Just to give you some perspective, beginning of this year, I basically did 5 certifications while doing a full-time job and being a father of 2, single parent. So if you have excuses of why you can't do certain things, I challenge you to really think about that as well. Now, I did all this with starting this website and coaching and mentoring a lot of people on the side. Finally, for everybody out there, I was talking to someone that recently got into a job, and maybe I'm gonna do a video with her, but having someone you can ask your questions to, it's mostly goes above that smart network that we talked about. Having someone in your environment that you could go throw some questions on, seeing things from a different angle, having a mentor and a coach to guide you, or at least get some kind of guidance. So with all that, really sharpen the saw really means for you guys to have a great way of preserving and enhancing the greatest asset you have, which is yourself and your brain. So guys, I hope that helps. I'm gonna talk more about in my future videos about some of the coaching sessions I've had with others and some of the lessons learned. I believe a lot of the questions they have will apply for you guys as well. I hope this video helps, and as always, stay safe, guys.